Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Brian. We're back on our 76 Jeep CJ-5 project today. It's behind me right here. So when I pulled the drivetrain out of the donor Jeep, the 77, we took the transfer case off and the back of the transmission actually came out. So I heard a bunch of needles fall out when I pulled it out of the vehicle, so now it's kind of apart. So I kind of wanted to get it put back together before I tear into the engine, anything else. I have it here on the bench, and let's get started. My son took the shifter, the whole assembly out of the top, and then I thought originally that may have led to this coming apart like this, but I believe you're supposed to use a puller actually to pull this out, and there's traces of red silicone on here, so someone's obviously been in here before. I don't think anything's worn in here, but anyway, I have the factory manual. We'll see what good this thing is, but here we go. This is an 1.25 inch socket. From what I understand, we need to take this lock nut off. Typically you would place it in gear, but since we can't really do that because all these things fell apart, we're just gonna see if we can blast it off the end here. Hold yours, folks. That was easy enough. It's a lock nut. And there's a washer behind that. I'm not sure if this will slide out of here or not. So next up, apparently we need to go in through the fill plug here, and I guess we'll start out by getting this thing out. We need to knock out a roll pin that's inside the transmission that holds the, apparently the reverse gear shaft in there. But let me get some of this crunchiness off here first. Well, it actually turns. I'm not sure if it'll show up from this angle, but right dead center in there is a roll pin we need to knock out. Actually, it's kind of weird. We knock it into the transmission. Can't really see it until if it's knocked out. Have a little less tapered punch. We'll go see if it'll go a little further and come all the way out. So that's a little mushroomed. I'm going to clean that up, see if it'll go a little further. I feel like that's all the way out. I'm not sure that's what we're supposed to do here. But the sleeves are captured, the shift fork slider thing's captured for that gear. From what I understand, now that all that's loose, there's a plug under all this garbage. What do you get out of there? The countershaft lives in behind this plug. And Jeep's talking about using some tool to pull it. I'm not sure what the hell they're talking about, but the internet's wise enough to advise me that we can turn this around, and this is gonna have to come off anyway, and it looks like we can drive this plug through, and that will push the countershaft plug out the back. Oh, this is nasty. I'm not even really sure why we would need to remove this at this point, so. Find a bigger punch, knock on that a little bit. This looks like this will be our best option. Let's see what happens. Ain't nothing happening. I'm gonna go ahead and get this off here just so it's out of the way. This is gonna need to come off anyway, and these are 1/2 inch heads. So this should pop off here. That gasket actually looks okay. So they said to mark the position, but there's an oil drain back groove in here, which obviously goes to the bottom, so we'll just know it goes back on that way. And then there's a seal in there we'll need to replace. So I don't really have a punch that big. I'm going to use the wrong tool, aka an extension. Feels and sounds like it's moving. I'm not sure if that's what I was expecting, but that shaft knocked in, and there were a bunch of needle bearings in there, and they all popped out of there. So I feel like that shaft is out of its position. It looks as though this shaft has actually moved its way out also. This may not be the desired order of events, but since this has moved a little bit, maybe this bearing will work its way out. I guess this would be the input shaft, input bearing. Things are not really going as I expected them to, but that's all right. So I'm going to get these clips off, possibly get this bearing out of here, which is going to have to come out anyway, because this input shaft appears to need to go out that direction. So these are not really snap rings, but they're retaining rings, and I actually have this pair of special snap-on pliers. It's made to do this. Hopefully they'll open enough. Of course they don't. They need to open a little bit more, so maybe. So it's almost off there. There we go. Now I would think this bearing would actually come off the shaft, unless it's a press fit on there, which that would suck. All right, so there's, I guess what you would call the input shaft gear bearing assembly. This synchronizer appeared to go right there. I'm just going to try to pull that stuff out in order. That ring went there. The rest of this is all kind of staying intact right there. I think this bearing will need to come off, and then we can pull this shaft out. I think at this point, we're supposed to knock this bearing adapter out of the case, but since it's already fallen out, let's see if it'll slide off here or what is actually holding it on. Got a 2-jaw puller on here. Let's just give it a little pressure and see if it moves. All right, it feels like it is. Keep track of that. So there's a spacer ring goes inside that bearing, and then a little washer, so we'll try to keep that all together. Now I think this will pull up and out. This whole main shaft assembly. And for what we're doing here, this thing will stay together. I'm not planning on disassembling this any further. I don't see any damage, any reason to. The only thing we'll need to put back together is the little sliding pads for this synchro. So I turned this up on end, and I fished out all the needle bearings that were in there for the countershaft. Put my extension down in there and beat a little more, and it finally knocked this plug out of the end, which we couldn't get knocked out earlier, and push this countershaft. I'm hoping out enough that this countershaft will come out, but I think now that the plugs finally come out, we can and there's the countershaft shaft. Now I've got my punch stuck, but now the countershaft should lift up out of here. And there's needles falling out of that thing everywhere. The hope would be that the new kit will have new needles in it, and these little rings hold them in. All that's left in here, I think this is the reverse gear. So there's a shaft that runs through here, and there's a hole at the front. Or let me just say, I guess maybe it's on the rear. It's on this side. It looks like we need to come through here and push this shaft out. Comes out the front up here, and it's got this roll pin attached to it, kind of what keeps it from spinning, I guess. Oh, she's pretty snug too. Now that it's that far, we really can't drive anything inside there. It's probably blasphemy. We'll use some channel locks on it very lightly. that would be, I guess, the reverse idler shaft. It's a little stained, but it should be all right. Now, from what I understand, this should pull out of here, just straight up. It is actually not full of needle bearings, it's just bushings in there, so we'll keep this in order. And then it has these thrust bearings, bushings, whatever, just so it didn't wear the cast iron on either end. And they have little tabs that kind of keep them located, so we'll just stick that sort of together if we can. So we remember how this all goes back together. Now I guess I'll need to, while we're here, knock this roll pin the rest of the way out. Done. And then it should be able to, that thing's pretty hammered, should be able to go back in and just get lightly started. Oh, actually that's loose enough, we won't even really do that. So we'll just keep that in a safe place for right now. Now we need to go in here and mop out all this filth and muck and get this ready to go back together. I have this kit from Crown Automotive. There's the part number. It's supposed to be the right one. Has bearings, needles, gaskets, seals. So let's hope this is the right stuff. So it doesn't 100% look like that kit has all the pieces I need to replace everything, but we're just going to put most of this back together. Got some petroleum jelly. Just going to lube these bushings up a little bit. Everything looks fine there. Take these thrust washers. We'll stick them up a little bit. They have a little tab that drop down in a slot. Probably can't see this, but I can probably just stick these washers in here. Then the shaft has this roll pin already installed. It should just slide in the end through the thrust washers. Through the whole gear shaft assembly. That's all there is to that. I was getting ready to slip in the countershaft along with its appropriate thrust washers, etc. Notice the new kit didn't appear to have the right one as far as the washer went, and it drops in with this little tab to the outside, sort of located in there. Notice it's a little chewed up with some, I don't know, sandpapery metal looking particles in there. Probably all right. But then I started looking a little closer at this countershaft, and it's got a pretty good amount of wear in it. So there's wear on this side, kind of goes away. It's on this side. Has some pitting in it. I could probably, I'm not sure why, there's kind of metal stuck in there from the end of the roll pin, I guess. When I pushed it out, came out. Could conceivably just flip it over and it would wear on the opposite side, but for for what this costs and the amount of trouble I'm going to change this again, we'd have to disassemble at this point. So I think we're going to hold here. It's been a few days. I got a new shaft, counter shaft, not worn. That's the part number, and that's super cheap. I mean, that's like $15, so that's obviously a common problem. I also got this gasket set, which appears to have the right stuff in it. Seals, gaskets, and this seal. So I think before we go any further with that counter shaft, this is the kind of rear output adapter, I think it's called. That seal goes in there. Hopefully I have the right bearing in that other kit. So we're going to get this bearing and seal changed. We'll give this seal puller a shot. I've had mixed results with this. Little washer there, and then there's a retaining ring, not really a snap ring, that holds this bearing in. Looks like that could be fun. My suspicion is this thing is just going to roll around in here. So the way this snap ring or retaining ring is made, with sharp edge in and out, you can't really grab it with anything because it spins around, and you can't pry it out because this side spins. So I'm going to do a little sample here with a drill bit, and it actually drilled in it. So maybe I can turn this into a snap ring and put 2 holes in it and squeeze it and get it out. I would have thought it would have been too hard to drill. Of course, if we can't get it out, we filled the bearing with metal shavings. We'll really have to clean it. So let's hope for the best. Now we just need to hope that I have snap ring pliers that'll fit that. Now we just need to hope that they won't break and my pliers will fit. Here goes. Wow, that was way easier than I thought it would have been. So now we've created a snap ring, and I'm assuming this bearing's pressed in there, or at least we'll need to pound it out. Is a 6307. It says 6307N. There's a groove in this one, which this one doesn't have, which it's retained, so it really doesn't make much of a difference. But we'll put the more square edge up here against the now new snap ring. because we can, I'm going to drill all the way through these. Of course, now that I've drilled all the way through, there's a burr, so let me file that off. Bam, just like that. Succeeded itself. Another kit has a new washer, so we'll just put that old one back in and hope for the best. And there's the new seal. Put this with the spring portion to the inside. And this should make an interference fit, so it shouldn't leak. There's that part, freshly rebuilt, and I've remembered to put the washer in there. And this would be the front bearing on the clutch shaft, probably pressed on here. We'll see if we can get it out, if we can get it off. If not, looks like we have the correct one. I can take it to work with me and use a hydraulic press there and change it. This would probably not be the preferred method, but let's see if it'll move. Oh yeah, it's falling right out of there. So the groove was to the outside. In theory, should go back on the same way. Make sure to support that inner race. Let's just give it a few taps. Looks like a little bit further to go. Sounded pretty solid. So now that's on there. So I guess next up we need to put in this idler shaft. Let's find the proper name here. We need to put in this countershaft, which drops down in the case, and that's the one we had to drive the roll pin out. So the fun part is apparently you can't just install it, because this gear in the front will interfere with putting the main shaft in. So we need to put the needle bearings in it, put the thrust washers in where they go, and just lay it in the bottom of the case till we put the rest of it in, and then we pick this up and slide the new shaft in, meanwhile lining up the roll pin hole. So to start with, got a baggie of new needles, so we'll put 25 in each one. To do that, we'll just goop it up with some good old petroleum jelly. And I'm not sure we'll be able to keep track, so we'll just start putting them in. So that's a problem. Looks like this kit has foiled me again. These are too short. So So I started putting this gem back together, and I realized that some of the bearings I had, the main shaft bearings that I put in are the right ones, but the needle bearings in that kit I showed you initially were too short. So, in fact, I can show you that here. There's a comparison of the two different lengths, so quite a bit different. So I kind of decided, let me go regroup a little bit, and I ended up finding this kit, which is the bearings and thrush washers and correct seals for this transmission. Not sure what happened on the first kit, so I got a little hosed on that one, but it comes with all new correct thrust washers, so we can put, and they're actually just plastic, kind of interesting. So at least we can put them back in. So first up would be the reversed idler. So these are the new improved needles, the right ones, and they appear to be the correct size for this transmission. And then these are the retaining rings. So this is about the point we got to before. I have petroleum jelly in there. Each one needs 25 of these needles stacked in there. I'll go ahead and count those, but 25 should be all that fits. There's all 25 right there. On the other end, we'll stick this retainer in there, sort of glue it in with some Vaseline. Now the thrust bearings or washers for the countershaft gear go in. They have little tabs that keep them located. And theoretically, this countershaft drops in. Without the bearings falling out and without the thrust washers slipping on out of the way. Which appears to be the problem is these are different. So this one needs to go on the reverse one, so I need to switch them out. This might be a little hard to see. I got the thrust washers. I actually had to put the old ones back in the reverse idler gear because they wouldn't, the new ones were too thick and wouldn't go in, which won't hurt anything. I have actually test fit this countershaft in here. And one thing I should note is this one thrust washer has the edge lopped off, and that one goes here at the back. Kind of goes even with this boss that holds the shaft in. Otherwise, I think one of the main shaft gears will chew it off. So now I have the other thrust washer, the front one down here in the case. Again, this one's plastic. All the new ones were. A little tab goes up. It's supposed to hold it in. And then you drop it in without disturbing it, which is proven to be a little difficult. Without pushing them out of the way. All right, so you can put your fingers in there and realign them if needed. So I think we should be good right there. Now you may be tempted to put this in, but apparently we can't at this point. We need to shove this countershaft down to the bottom of the case. So all this other stuff will clear going in. Of course, that screws up your thrust washers and gets them all out of whack. Let's hope we can go in with our fingers and fix those. Before I forget, we need to put this retaining ring back on this front bearing that we replaced. That's all those pliers wanted to get, but that's on there. So I think we're ready to put the rest of this back in. Here's the main shaft. I did not disassemble it any more than this. Didn't see any need to. My hope is that it'll drop down in here and just kind of sit there for a second. Then I have this rear adapter, bearing adapter. I've already put the seal in and the new bearing in it. It goes, slides up in the transmission this direction. There's also a little washer right there and a spacer on this end. So if I can keep that all aligned, get this washer to cooperate, that should slide up on the main shaft there. And I'm hoping I can just easily tap this on. Still lacks about a 1/4 inch. All right, now let's see if that will go up in the bore like it's supposed to. All right, that sounds good and solid. So I suppose next, I can go ahead and put this transfer case adapter, or whatever they call it. I should be able to put this adapter, transfer case adapter on here, along with this washer and nut. There's probably a torque spec for that. I'll see what that is. See how close I feel like I am with the impact. So we're kind of going off course here, since I don't think this came apart the way it was supposed to. So we're going to go ahead and kind of put this together through this end. That's the hope anyway. Of course, I also hope that I can get this in there now, which of course I can't. So we'll revisit this for a second. This second, third synchronizer sleeve needs to be installed in here in the case before you put this in, because it won't fit otherwise. So let's go ahead and get that slid in there. Now that slid in there, we can tap this back in. So as I said earlier, this is probably not the right order of events to do this, but these little synchronizer pads, synchronizer inserts, need to go in first, because this sliding synchronizer, sliding ring, whatever it is, you can't do it with the shaft pushed back in, so it's pushed back out. These need to all go in position here, and there's 2 springs that hold tension up on them, and then the notches here in the synchronizer needs to be lined up. So we'll stick a little goo in there and see if that'll help hold them in as I spin them around. Okay, now this ring can go in. These little grooves on here, not sure which direction they were supposed to go. They were facing that way when I took it apart, so that's the way I'm going to put it back together. And my hope would be that this will just slide on there and without pushing those pads out. I believe that's correct. And then when we put this rest of the shaft in here, we can actually probably do this now. This piece of synchronizer goes right there and lines up with those little pads. We'll go ahead and put that in now. Now I can put the main shaft back in again. All right, now I think all that's left is a set of needles to get packed in there. And theoretically, this will slide on there and we'll be back together, or mostly back together. These are what fell out to start this whole endeavor. This kit appears to have the correct ones this time. They just get piled up in there. All right, those needles are packed in there and they should slide up right onto this, the rest of the shaft here. I'll put a little petroleum jelly in there so it has a little initial lubrication. There's a little bit of play back here, so I need to lift up on this back shaft. All right, so now we need to get this countershaft lifted up so the countershaft shaft can get driven in here from the back. It's already installed as far as it'll go. The book says to use stiff wire and pick up on it. I'm going to see what I can come up with. Of course, I didn't have the camera turned on, but I rolled the transmission obviously over on its side and kind of just put this punch through. And it didn't, the shaft didn't want to move. All of a sudden it clunked right in position. So I don't want to take it back apart to show you that. But looks like it's a pretty straight shot down in there. And it looks like the needles are sort of aligned. So let's see if this will shove in there. All right, it started in on the first set of needles. It looks like we are pretty lined up. All right, that is pretty dang close. I'm not sure I'm going to get it any closer than that. I ground the end just slightly to put a little more of a taper on it. I'm not sure how much good that's going to do. Of course, with everything magnetized, let's just stick to the case. This might be a little unorthodox. Stick it on with some petroleum jelly under this small punch. All right, it started in the hole. It's not a super tight fit. But it's going, so I'm going to take it. And that's all the further I'm going to go. All right, so I think we're mostly back together. Countershaft turns down there. This all seems to slide like it should. Have a new seal to go in this nose cone housing. There's a new seal to go in here. Looks like the only way to get it out is from this side because there's no lip on the back. Yeah. So that's not going to work. Looks to be correct. While we're here, we can go ahead and test fit this gasket. Looks like that's correct. I'll just put a little tiny amount of RTV to hold the gasket in place. Just bolts on with the drain back at the bottom. And took the shifter off, the whole top of the transmission, rather than just pulling the shifter out. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together just like it is and try to clean this nasty thing up, but I feel like I'm better off doing it, putting the top back on before I try to clean it anymore. So should just drop into these shift forks right here. This is about the time I lost the audio on this. So the shifter, this cap, I put some big pliers on it. It just unscrews. This cap is threaded on there. And then the shifter itself just pulls out of the top of the housing. And that's all it drops in there to the shift rails. There's pins inside here that are captured by the cap, and they kind of come out. Then I noticed that it looks like they're two different sizes, but the hole's the same size as the bigger one, which further leads me to believe this has been a part before and those are wrong. So I ended up with the shifter not attached. It was easier to deal with. I glued the gasket to the top so I didn't risk ripping it when I put it back in, and then you can kind of put the transmission in neutral, work it around, and the shift forks will drop into the synchronizer rings. I test fit all the bolts, and then I thought that those are through bolts. They go all the way into the case, so it's possible that oil could wick up through those. So I pulled them all back out and put a little dab of silicone on there, just on the end. So this cap needs to go in. Kind of forgot this. I put a little silicone on it and then tapped it in, which is probably not necessary because it looks like the gasket where the transfer case bolts on will cover that and we'll seal that up. So there's the transmission post cleanup, post paint job. That is AMC light blue, which is the color of the engine's supposed to be. You can see traces of it here and there. My assumption is that the transmissions were also painted that color. I can't really find any information on that, so if anybody knows the correct color, let me know. There it is compared to this partially nasty. I've already cleaned this once. The transfer case, which is coming soon. Anyway, that'll wrap up this video on putting back together a T-150 transmission. Be sure to subscribe to get more riveting content like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.